We're now on Daf Kuf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. Tlosa Rigli. Abai delayed handing down a decision, a ruling in this case, whether or not to allow her to get married based on this guy who boasts about the murder of a Jew, of her husband. He waited 3 regalim when the Chachamim would gather together. Again, it's after Churban Abayis, but they used to gather together for drashos for the regalim. Amalei Rav Ado bar Ava, he speaks to that woman, addressing her. He says, Zil Kame de Rav Yosef de Charif Sakina. You should present the case to Rav Yosef. He's got a sharp knife, which means he's able to come up with original svaras, and maybe he could find a heter for you. Ozla Kameshi comes to Rav Yosef Pashat, and Rav Yosef proves the din in the Isha's case. Mehamas Nisim. Mishnah says, or maybe it's a brisa. So there's a guy who sells his fruits in the market. The Omar need declared Paris Halol Shal Orlahem, that these peros are orla. Now, in his mind, he thought that would make it a great buy because it comes from young trees that are very healthy. They produce excellent fruits. Another case, the guy in Chutz La'aretz declares that these fruits are azekahen. They came from Eretz Yisrael, from a certain place called Azeka, which is well known for its exceptionally good fruits. Or a third case, Shel Neter Avayhe. Here also, again, he's telling them that it's a young tree that produces fruit. It's only 4 years old. And the Brisa says, Lo Amar Klum. We're not going to take him seriously and rely on his claim that these are Arla or Ravai. And why not? Shalonis Kavin El Ashbiach Mikcha. He's trying to boast about what a great buy it is. He'll lie through his teeth. Whatever marketing tool he could use to fabricate, to make it attractive, to be mashbiach his mekach, he's going to say it. So he's going to tell you, oh, wow, this is from a young tree. It's Orla. It's Azeka. It's Neter Avai. He'll say whatever he has to say in order to be mashbiach the mekach. So you see, says Rav Yosef from this Mishnah, that any time a guy has a reasoning, a motivation behind what he says, like to be mashbiach mekcha, we don't pay attention to what he said. It has no weight or evidence value at all. So therefore, when this guy who was threatening to kill a Jew for not willing to violate the Shabbos and cut down the aspasta, and he says, well, I killed so-and-so, and the reason I put him to death is because he refused to be Machal Shabbos when I asked him to cook for me. We don't rely on this akum at all because he has a motivation to come up with this story. He wants to threaten one Jew and get that Jew to listen to him and obey him. So he tells a whole story about another Jew. That's not called Miksiach L'Fituma. Abba Yudin Ish Sidon, somebody from the city in Eretz Yisrael called Sidon, Omar, Maisa b'Yisrael, Di'ovi Kochavim, Sheholchu Baderech. A guy and a Jew were on the road. Uba Ovi Kochavim, now the guy comes back from this journey. V'yomer declares Chaval al Yehudi Shahoya imi baderech shemeis b'derech ukvartiv. Woe, the loss of this Jew that died on the road, and I buried him. A Sirus Ishto. They married off his wife because of Masechet Lefituma. He's believed. He has no vested interest in lying. Another story. Shuv Maisa Bekolar Shel Bnei Adam, a group of people. They were on the way to the city in Eretz Yisrael called Antochia. Uba Ovekachamecha v'yomer Chaval al Kolar Shel Bnei Adam Shemesu Ukvartim. The guy comes back and he says, "Oh, whoa! There was a whole group of Jews over here, and they died, and I buried them." The CUS shall say, they accepted his testimony, and all 5 girls were able to fulfill. Sorry. All 5 wives, I meant to say. I said girls. All 5 wives were able to get married because the testimony of this guy was Masechet Lefituma, and he's believed. Shuv Ma'asav Shishim Bnei Adam, Mahalchim Lekarkom Beitar. 60 people were on the way to Beitar, which was at that time in a siege. That's called a Karkom. Ubo we call Yomer Chaval al Shishim Bnei Adam Shayu Mahalchim B'derech Beitar Shemesu Kvartim. I buried 60 Jews who are on the way to Beitar. Again, Masechet Levitumo is reliable. The Mishnah says, "Me'idim li araner li'olavona." When the testimony comes in to identify the dead body, and there was no sunlight, but they got light from a torch or from the moon, lunar light. And that's reliable. They could identify the dead. Mesian alpi baskel. If they hear a baskel that declares ploni mess, they look around, who's talking, who's making this statement. They can't find anybody. We're going to rely on that call, on that voice, and we're going to marry off his wife. Maisa bi echad shaman al rosh hahar. A man climbed up a mountain, and he cried out, "Ish ploni ben ploni buckle ploni mess." And then when they climbed up to see who's this guy, lo matzu shamadim, they didn't find anyone. They see what's ishto. That's a baskel. Shuv Maisavit Salmon in a city called Salmon in Eretz Yisrael B'nechad. Sha'amar declares an ish ploni ben ish ploni. Nishachani nachash v'arei ani meis. I'm about to die. This is my name. V'holchu, and they went to check him out. Who's speaking? Elohi kiruhu. They couldn't recognize his face. Holchu v'siu es ishto. Normally you have to recognize the face of the corpse, but here, based on his declaration that he's about to die, he got bitten by a poisonous snake. We could be mater his wife. Omar Rava bar Shmuel Tana, we learned in a brisa. Beit Shammai Omrim ein Mesian al pi baskel. We will not marry off a woman based on a baskel. Beit Hillel Omrim Mesian al pi baskel. Gemara asks Maiko Mashmalon, what is Rava telling me? Why is he bringing this brisa? If he's telling me about the machlokas between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, well, we're going to paskin like Beit Hillel. And why? Because Masnisani, we have a Stam Mishnah that says Mesian al Baskel. That's the Mishnah we just learned. And the Mishnah doesn't even quote the dissenting view of any Tana of Beit Shammai. So therefore, there's no need for the statement here of Rabbah that halacha is kibei shamai, kibei sul. And the answers are mashma. There's a chiddush here of Rabbah to e mishtachas stama. If you'll find another brisa that's also stama, it doesn't mention any machlokas, and that stama will say ein masim. So now you can have two mishnayos, both of which are stamos. One says masi and the other says ein masin, and you don't know how to paskin. The answer is that brisa is Beit Shammai. Forget about that brisa. It's not laloch. The Mishnah tells us about a person who stood up on a mountain and he declared that I, so and so, the son of so and so, am dying. They didn't find him. So maybe that person was letting out that clarion call. He was a shade. Tries to disguise himself and fool people. We cannot rely on this Eidus. My answer is on Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Sherod Mus Adam. The Gemara says, okay, you saw the face of a man and not a shade. Inu Nami Damu, a shade could make himself look like a human being. And Gemara answers the Chazale Bebua. They saw that the person up on the mountain has a shadow. A shade does not have a shadow. So Gemara asks me, Inu, and the shade of Nami Islu Babua. There are certain high-class shadim that have a shadow. So we still have to worry that maybe this guy's a shade, and we cannot rely on his testimony. And the Gemara answers, the Mishnah is talking about a case of the Chazale Babua Dibabu, the shade of a shade. So Gemara asks, Vidilma Liditu, maybe the shadim Islu Babua Dibabu, the double kind of shade. You probably noticed it, that sometimes you see one dark shade and one light shade. Amar Rab Chanin, Amar Rab Yonasan, Sheda Babua Isle. Babua de Babua Lesle. If you're a Bucky in Hilchus Shadim, in the biology of Shadim, you'll know that a shade can never have a Babua de Babua. So we know he was a human being and not a shade. So the Gemara with Dilmut Sarahavi. Maybe that person was the tzara of the woman who's going to now fall for Yibum. And we know that a tzara sometimes has kavod lekalkel as tzara, so we don't rely on the edus of a tzara. My answer is Tana de Bei Rabbi Yishmael b'shasa sakana kostin v'nostin afal pisha ein makirin. If a person is in great danger, let's say he was thrown into a pit, and he cries out, please write a get for my wife. We're allowed to write and sign and seal and deliver the get. Afal pishe makirin also, even though we don't recognize it. And the same thing here applies in the case of a Baal Baska. If we won't rely on her, is then we have no other testimony, the basis of which we could be matir this wife. So that's similar to Shasa Sakana. And if it's Shasa Sakana, we're not going to worry, A, that it's a tzara, and B, that she is Makalkel, and that's what her kavana was. So this leads us to the Mishnah of Omar Rabbi Akiva, towards the bottom of Kuf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. I'm just looking and seeing, I think that maybe we can make a siyum tomorrow on Masechet Yevamot. What say thou?